The moment I saw her walk into our house for the first time, something shifted in my chest. Not a bad feeling, exactly. More like when the weather changes before a storm and you can't quite explain how you know, you just do. My daughter had been seeing Mathieu for about 8 months by then. She brought him home for Thanksgiving, which in our family is a big deal. Her mother and I had been married for 31 years before she passed, and the holidays were still hers in every way that mattered. The good china, the cranberry sauce made from scratch, the way we always said grace, even though neither of us was particularly religious anymore. Our daughter kept all of that alive, so when she showed up with someone in tow, I paid attention. Mathieu was charming, I'll give him that. He brought a bottle of Niagara ice wine, complimented the house, helped clear the table without being asked. My daughter looked at him the way her mother used to look at me when we were young, like the whole room narrowed down to one person. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself. I shook his hand, poured him a scotch, and told myself I was being paranoid. By February, they were engaged. She called me on a Tuesday evening, and I could hear the smile in her voice before she even said the words. She was 34. She'd waited longer than most of her friends, and I knew she'd been lonely in ways she never quite admitted to me. I told her I was happy for her. I meant it. But after I hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time with the light off, just thinking. Mathieu worked in commercial real estate. He had an office in downtown Toronto, drove a leased BMW, wore watches that cost more than some people's rent. He talked about deals the way men do when they want you to know they're doing well, casually, with just enough detail to paint a picture. My daughter worked as a physiotherapist. She owned her condo outright. She had her mother's RRSP investments that had rolled over to her, and a small inheritance from my mother-in-law that we'd put in a trust years ago. She wasn't wealthy by any stretch, but she was stable, careful. She'd worked hard for everything she had. The more time I spent around Mathieu, the more I noticed things that I couldn't quite name. The way he deflected when I asked about his family. The way he laughed a little too quickly at his own stories. Once at dinner, he mentioned a condo development he was spearheading in Mississauga, and when I asked a follow-up question 2 weeks later, the details had changed. Not dramatically, just enough that if you hadn't been paying attention, you wouldn't notice. I was paying attention. I didn't say anything to my daughter. I'd learned something from watching other fathers do it wrong. You say it too soon, and all you do is push them closer to the person you're warning them about. So I waited. I watched. I started quietly asking around through an old friend of mine who'd worked in property law for decades. I gave him Mathieu's full name and the name of the company he'd mentioned. Just asked him to keep his ears open. The engagement party was held at a banquet hall in Oakville. 120 people, open bar, a photo booth in the corner, with props that the younger guests thought were hilarious. My daughter was radiant. Mathieu gave a toast that made everyone laugh and a few people cry. He was good at that. He knew exactly what a room needed to hear. I was standing near the bar, talking to an old neighbor of ours, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I excused myself and stepped out into the corridor. Is this the father of the bride? A woman's voice. Steady but careful. Like she'd rehearsed what she wanted to say, and was determined to say it. It is, I said. I'm sorry to call during the party. I didn't know another way to reach you. My name is Dominique. I used to be Mathieu's common law partner. She paused. I think you need to know some things before this goes any further. I looked back through the glass doors at the party. My daughter was laughing at something, her hand on Mathieu's arm. I turned back toward the wall. I'm listening, I said. Dominique told me they had been together for 4 years. They'd lived together in a condo in Hamilton. A condo that was, she believed, still partially in both their names, though she hadn't been able to get a clear answer from a lawyer yet, because Mathieu had structured things in a way that made everything complicated to untangle. They had separated 14 months ago, not because things had fallen apart naturally, because she'd found out he had been seeing someone else, a woman in Brampton, while telling Dominique he was traveling for work. There were debts, she said. He put things on joint credit that I didn't know about. I'm still dealing with it. I couldn't let someone else go through what I went through, especially if she doesn't know. I stood in that corridor for a long time after I hung up. Through the glass, I could see my daughter dancing with her cousin, both of them laughing like they were teenagers again. I didn't go back inside right away. I walked to the far end of the hall and called my friend the property lawyer. Left a message asking him to look specifically at Hamilton, at a condo registered to Machu's name. Then I straightened my jacket, walked back into that room, and spent the next 3 hours smiling at people I barely knew. I have never worked harder at anything in my life. The weeks that followed were careful and quiet. My friend got back to me with what he'd found, and it wasn't good. The Hamilton condo was still a mess of overlapping ownership documents. There were 2 credit lines in Machu's name with balances that made no sense for someone who claimed to be doing as well as he did. And when my friend dug into the commercial real estate company, he found that Machu wasn't a principal. He was a junior associate. The kind of role where you take clients to lunch and make things sound bigger than they are. None of this was illegal. I want to be honest about that. A man can be careless with money, can exaggerate his position, can even be a lousy partner, and none of that is something I could take to a courthouse. But my daughter was being asked to build a life with this person. She deserved to know who she was building it with. I asked her to have lunch with me, just the 2 of us, at the Italian place near her clinic that she'd loved since she was a teenager. I waited until the food came because I didn't want her to have nowhere to look. She didn't take it well. I didn't expect her to. "You've been investigating him?" The way she said it, quiet, controlled, was worse than if she'd shouted. "I made some calls. Yes, Dad." She set her fork down. "He's not on trial. I know that. You don't like him. That's what this is. I like him fine. That's not the point." She left before dessert. She didn't speak to me for 11 days. I counted them. Each one felt like standing in a room where all the furniture had been moved 2 inches to the left. Everything slightly wrong, nothing you could explain to someone who hadn't been in the room before. Mathieu called me during those 11 days. Once, he was polite, almost too polite, which told me everything. He said he hoped we could move past this, that he understood a father's concern, that he only wanted what was best for my daughter. He didn't deny anything I'd found. He just framed it. The debts were old, the condo situation was being resolved, the job title was a technicality. "I love her," he said. "That's the only thing that matters." "No," I said, "it isn't." He didn't call again. My daughter came back around on her own. She showed up at my house on a Saturday morning, which is what she's always done when something is sitting heavy with her. Just appeared at the door like she had when she was 12, and needed to talk through something she couldn't say at the dinner table. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. I asked him about Dominique, she said. What did he say? That she was unstable, that she'd been harassing him, that I shouldn't believe anything she told me. She turned the mug in her hands, so I called her. I didn't say anything. "She's not unstable," my daughter said. She's someone who trusted the wrong person and is still trying to get out from under it." She looked up at me. "She sent me documents, Dad, bank statements, a joint credit line he opened without telling her. The condo title transfer that still hasn't gone through after 14 months. The wedding was called off 2 weeks later. Mathieu did not take it quietly. There were messages, long ones, that my daughter showed me with shaking hands, not threatening exactly, but the kind of thing where the subtext was unmistakable. He accused her of being manipulated by her father. He said she was throwing away the best thing that had ever happened to her. He said things that I will not repeat because they are not mine to repeat. She changed her locks and blocked his number. She's stronger than she looks, my daughter. She always has been. What surprised me most in the months that followed was how often I thought about Dominique. A woman I'd spoken to for 12 minutes in a banquet hall corridor had done something genuinely decent. She could have kept quiet. She'd already been through the worst of it. The separation, the debt, the legal tangle, and calling me had cost her something. It had taken courage, or maybe just a bone-deep tiredness, with watching the same story repeat itself with a new cast. I wrote her a letter, an actual letter, on paper. I thanked her. I told her that what she'd done had mattered, and that I hoped things were getting easier. I didn't expect a reply. I wasn't writing it to get one. She wrote back 3 weeks later, short note, said she was glad it had helped, said she was doing better, said she'd finally gotten a lawyer who knew what she was dealing with. My daughter spent last Christmas at my house. She brought her best friend and her best friend's husband and their 2 kids, and the place was loud in a way it hasn't been in a long time. She made her mother's cranberry sauce from scratch, the real recipe, not the one on the back of the bag. She looked tired in the way that people look when they've been through something hard and come out the other side and haven't quite finished processing it yet. But she laughed that evening, genuinely, more than once. After the kids were in bed and her friend and the husband had moved to the living room, she and I stood in the kitchen doing the dishes the way we always do, side by side. And she said, quietly without looking at me, "I'm glad you made those calls." I didn't say anything. I just kept drying the dishes. Some things don't need to be spoken to be understood. That's something her mother taught me a long time ago in this same kitchen over a different set of dishes. Certain things you carry forward from the people you've loved and lost. Certain things you try to pass on. I don't know what Mathieu is doing now. I don't spend any time thinking about it. The truth has a way of catching up with people. Not always as fast as we'd like. Not always in the way we'd choose, but it gets there. I've lived long enough to believe that. And my daughter is here. She's well. She knows her own worth. That's enough. That's more than enough.